media. I mean, The Bachelor is still one of the highest rated shows on network television. And even Sex and the City, which billed itself as being this feminist phenomenon, 3 of the 4 characters on that show ended up married by the end of the series. And frankly, Samantha was the only one who was allowed to not be married because she was, quote unquote, the slut. Like, we're still a culture that says marriage is going to fix everything. All you need is a husband and all your problems are going to go away.
Yeah, and to go back to your Sex and the City example, even at the end of the series, they kind of seem to be flirting with the idea that her and who's the really hot guy she was dating?
Jarrett. Smith Jarrett?
Yeah,
right?
they kind of teased the idea that she had found her, quote, one and only. And I remember thinking, oh, brother, like, nobody on this show can get past the idea that everybody has this one perfect person for them. And when they link up with them, poof, all their problems are solved.
Yeah, exactly. And it was such a bummer for a show that claimed it was so female forward and such a feminist show that all of a sudden, no, the answer to everything on that show was a man has to love you.
That whole pop culture thing, I didn't realize how much for me until I started working on this show. And we talk about that a lot, about how the audience of this show has been really like transformative and helpful for me as a person. But somebody wrote in a comment once, like, we need to stop defining success as only this one thing, as in you get married and you have the 2 kids and you get the house and you have the pet, and you have the job, and that is success and that is the only thing. Because we see that over and over again in pop culture. If you don't have that, then something is missing from your life.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I wrote in my book, How to Be Married, that I got more likes on my Facebook status when I got engaged than I did when I published a book or a second book or a third book. Like, everyone thought that this was the biggest thing I'd ever done in my entire life, the most important thing, compared to all of these professional achievements that I'd had the 35 years prior to just meeting some dude.
That's amazing that you even say that. I have a lot of friends who sort of work as digital strategists and social media managers, and they've actually done studies that when you say things like, if you made a Facebook post that was like, I'm engaged in a huge book project I want to tell you about,
yeah,
the algorithm will actually privilege that post, and more people will see it because they think, oh, she just got engaged. Huge news. So even Mark Zuckerberg is controlling how we think about marriage.
I know. All I want to do is trick Facebook on a daily basis. So I'm like, look at my new baby. This book, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win. Buy it now on Amazon.
That's awesome.
But it has been really interesting just hearing the stories. And so now that I am married, and now that I want to create this marriage of equals, for which there aren't role models out there for it, because we're the first generation, or essentially the second and third generation that are really doing this. My mom certainly was not in a marriage of equals. I know that my grandmother wasn't. So now that I'm doing this, I mean, it's really just trial and error. And that's why the stories of how other people make marriage work, like the nitty gritty, the good, the bad, the really, really ugly, I find that so helpful. Because especially going back to social media, all we see on social media are people looking perfect and looking filtered, and that all of their relationships are super happy. And my friends who post the most with their husbands or boyfriends on social media are the ones that I know are probably getting divorced.
So they've actually done studies. According to a study recently published by the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, couples who are always bragging about their significant other on social media, the hubby, the hubster, all of that, well, they're actually more likely to be insecure about the state of their relationship. So the more you're posting, the more you can't get enough of your hashtag bae or whatever, the more likely, according to this data, you are to be in a relationship that you feel insecure about.
Totally. And I want to ban the word hubby. I really do.
Oh, my gosh.
It's so gross. I've had to make a bunch of new friends since I moved from New York to San Francisco. And that's one of my, friend red flags. Like, if you're a woman who uses the word hubby, I'm like, we're not going to hang out again.
Well, you bring up a good point. I mean, why do you think that especially women feel this need to depict a version of their romantic situations, romantic lives and marriages and what have you on social media? I actually feel quite a bit of pressure to do that. And I wonder, where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from pop culture. I really do. Pop culture has programmed us and has told us that our marriage our husband is the most important thing about us, and that we need to show the world that we're, quote unquote, succeeding at this thing. And it's so sad because I would love to just post pictures of me like at the computer, finishing a book, or at the office, having a big meeting. But, you know, no one is going to like that as much as like this picture of my husband doing the dishes, which he does do because we have an equal marriage, because he's a feminist man. But yeah, I blame pop culture for all of it. Pop culture has programmed us, and now we're trying to deprogram us to prioritize what we should be prioritizing in our lives. And that's not to say that marriage isn't great and awesome. I love being married, but it is a struggle to figure out how marriage works for you, as opposed to these role models that we've seen in the past.
That's so funny you bring up the dishes, because I once was in a relationship where I told the guy at the beginning of the relationship, I will cook, but you have to do the dishes. And lo and behold, it becomes more and more that I am doing the dishes. And I wrote a 30-page essay called Apologist Theory and Why You Have to Do the Dishes. And I never gave it to him. We just broke up because I realized I was taking it too far. But
I'd really like you to publish that somewhere, because I think that's the kind of thing that would go viral.
Yeah, that's also the most Annie thing I've ever heard. Also, can I just, as a side note, I have a theory about dishes. I will never, this is a very privileged thing to say, I will never live in another living quarters of any kind that does not have a dishwasher. I moved into an apartment recently that did not have one, and I was like, I have to pay to have one installed. I don't care. I think not having a dishwasher is it's like you're asking for your relationship to be doomed. Because there are two types of people in this world: people who let the dishes linger after a meal, people who want to do them right away. And if you're not compatible, you're asking for trouble. So get a dishwasher. That is Bridget's tip for life.
I think that's a great
tip for a happy marriage.
Exactly.
Get a damn dishwasher.
I know, but knowing me, it'll be get a dishwasher, separate bathrooms. By the end of it, it's like just live across the street. Don't even live near.
Let's just, like Woody Allen and Mia Farrow, live across the park, and we know how that turned out.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have a really funny dishes story. So one of the couples that I interview on this podcast, Committed, she has no short-term memory. So she had a stroke, and now she has almost permanent short-term amnesia. So there's this one story where she was doing the dishes, and she looks at her husband, and she's like, how long have I been doing the dishes every night? Because she didn't remember. And he's like, just, a few months. Because every night he's like, hey, it's your turn to do the dishes. And she's like, okay, I guess you must have done them last night. I can't remember because I have no short-term memory. Pretty awesome. That made me wish that sometimes my husband would have amnesia, but then I'm like, I think I've just seen the movie Overboard too many times.
Oh, a classic of the genre.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
I'm situated in a place where I can hear what like episodes for Committed the editors are working on. So I've heard like snippets of interesting stories that you've gotten. Could you talk a little bit, give us a preview of what kind of stories we'll be hearing on this podcast?
Yeah, so the goal of Committed was to have an open conversation about marriage. Like I said, to talk about the nitty-gritty, the hard stuff, but also to find couples that are in these interesting relationships. So that ranges from everything to a couple where one person no longer has a short-term memory, to a couple of porn stars who are monogamous in their marriage, but they're still having sex with other people on screen. We have a couple who's been married for 28 years, and they're the longest married couple with Down syndrome. And I mean, I cried probably half a dozen times doing this interview with them because they're just the most in love, happiest couple I've ever met, because they're constantly living in the present. They're not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow or what happened yesterday. They're just madly in love with each other in the here and now, and it's really amazing. One of our earliest episodes is a couple that was blown up together in the Boston Marathon bombing, and both of them lost their legs. Jess lost both legs. Patrick lost one leg, and they'd only been married 7 months, and this is how they kind of learned how to be married while going through this really tragic thing with each other. And so there's a lot of heartbreak, there's a lot of tragedy, and then there's a lot of really uplifting stories. I think that it's a pretty good mix. I just finished up an episode today about a married couple of journalists who are rivals at different newspapers. They both cover baseball, but one covers it for the San Francisco Chronicle and one covers it for the San Jose Mercury News. And it's actually the woman who's the much, much better baseball reporter, and how their marriage survives this competitive workplace environment, which was really fun, and they're awesome. And I got to go to an A's game and hang out in the sports writer's box for that one, so it was great. And we're constantly looking for news stories. It's incredible, but we're getting emails every day from couples who are like, I want to tell you about my own marriage. And that's the part that's so cool, because I think that every marriage has a story, and it's our goal to bring them out and to try to tell them.
We'll hear more from Jo after a quick break. Look, y'all, I love the way my hair straightener makes my hair look, but